Most people think prison punishment has a clear boundary. You go in. Time passes. You come out. But modern prison doesn't work that cleanly anymore. Because in the last few years, something changed inside prison walls quietly, without public debate, and for many inmates, it never changed back. It starts with a door. Not slammed. Not dramatic. Just closed. And then, it doesn't open. The day doors disappeared in early 2020, prisons across the United Kingdom and the United States introduced emergency lockdown measures. On paper, they were temporary. On paper, they were for safety. Movement was restricted. Programs were paused. Time outside cells was reduced. At first, inmates were told it would last days, then weeks, then until further notice. That notice never came. Instead, something else arrived: a new schedule. 22 hours inside. Sometimes 23. Every day. Not as punishment. Not because of misconduct. But because the system could no longer function the way it used to. What 22 hours actually means. 22 hours sounds abstract. Until you break it down. It means eating in the same space where you sleep. Using the toilet inches from where you sit. Pacing the same few steps until they feel burned into memory. It means your entire world shrinks to the size of a small room, sometimes shared, sometimes not. Cells in many UK prisons were built decades ago. Some over a century old. They were never designed for this. They were designed to hold people temporarily, not indefinitely. Yet suddenly, they became full-time environments. The cell becomes the world. When a person is confined that long, the cell stops being a place you're kept. It becomes the only place that exists. Every sound inside it becomes amplified. Every movement feels repetitive. Every flaw becomes impossible to ignore. Peeling paint, cold walls, artificial light. Even time itself begins to feel strange. Because when days are identical, the brain stops recording them properly. Time without shape on the outside. Time is broken up naturally. Work hours, social events, movement. Inside a 22-hour lockdown, those markers vanish, days blend together, weeks pass unnoticed. Some people stop tracking the date entirely, others stop caring. This isn't laziness. It's a known psychological response to prolonged confinement. When nothing changes, the brain stops labeling time as meaningful. The soundtrack of confinement inside modern prisons. Time is measured by sound, keys, footsteps, doors opening, but not yours. You hear movement without being part of it. That's important, because hearing freedom without accessing it creates a unique kind of tension. Not explosive, not loud, compressed. Silence is not empty from the outside. Silence sounds peaceful. Inside prison, silence becomes pressure. Long stretches without conversation. Without stimulation, without purpose. Televisions become background noise. Books run out. Thoughts grow louder. And when the mind runs out of distractions, it turns inward. Not everyone likes what they find there. Lockdown without solitary. Officially, this is not solitary confinement, but functionally, it often feels close. People are isolated from movement, from programming, from meaningful interaction. The difference is scale. This isn't one person in isolation, it's thousands. And because it's widespread, it becomes easier to normalize. Why this became permanent? When pandemic restrictions eased, many expected prisons to return to normal. They didn't. Staff shortages made lockdowns convenient. Overcrowding made movement difficult. Budget constraints made full schedules unrealistic. Lockdown solved problems quietly. And quiet solutions rarely get reversed. By 2022 and 2023, inspection reports in both the UK and US confirmed the reality. Extended confinement was no longer an emergency response. It was standard practice. The body adapts first. At first, the body resists. Restlessness, poor sleep, muscle tension. Then something changes. Movement decreases. Energy drops. Stillness becomes default. The body adapts to confinement faster than the mind. And that adaptation has consequences. Because once the body accepts stillness as normal, activity feels disruptive. The mind follows psychologically. Long confinement alters perception. Minor problems feel larger. Small frustrations linger longer. Motivation fades, not dramatically, quietly. People stop planning ahead. Stop imagining future events. Stop expecting change. Hope becomes exhausting. The dangerous normalization. This is the most unsettling part. Not that people suffer, but that they adjust. Lockdown stops feeling temporary. It starts feeling permanent. And once something feels permanent, people stop resisting it. They endure it. Why most people never hear about this? There are no riots attached to this story. No viral footage. No chaos. Just doors that stay closed. And systems that quietly accept it. From the outside, everything looks calm, but calm does not mean healthy. The question that lingers here's the question few people ask. What happens to a person when they spend most of their life waiting? With nowhere to go, and nothing to move toward. Because punishment isn't just about restriction, it's about time, and when time loses shape, something deeper is affected. This is only the beginning, because physical confinement is the surface-level damage. The deeper impact happens inside the mind, where silence, repetition, and isolation begin to rewrite behavior. At first, silence feels like relief. No shouting, no constant movement, no chaos. But silence doesn't stay neutral for long. When hours pass without interruption, the mind starts filling the space. Thoughts repeat, memories surface uninvited. Regrets grow louder, without distraction. The brain turns inward and it doesn't always choose gentle places to go. This is where lockdown begins doing its real work, the loss of external anchors in everyday life. People rely on anchors to stay grounded. Schedules, social cues, small interactions. Inside prolonged lockdown, those anchors disappear. There are no casual conversations, no spontaneous movement, no moments that break routine. Days become indistinguishable. And when the brain can't tell one day from another, it stops recording them as meaningful. Time doesn't just slow down, it dissolves. Why time feels broken? People in extended confinement often report the same sensation. Time feels unreal. Hours stretch endlessly. Weeks vanish without memory. Months pass without landmarks. This isn't imagination. Psychologists have long documented how confinement disrupts the brain's ability to process time. When nothing changes, the brain stops tagging experiences. Life becomes one long and broken moment. And humans are not meant to live that way. The pressure of proximity in many modern prisons. Cells hold more than one person. Spaces designed for short confinement become shared environments. 22 hours a day. There is no distance, no retreat, no privacy. Every sound is amplified, every movement noticed. Small habits become sources of irritation. Minor disagreements linger, without space to decompress. Emotions have nowhere to go. They compress. Why conflict changes shape? Extended lockdown doesn't always create violence. More often, it creates tension, quiet tension. People withdraw, communication becomes minimal, eye contact decreases. This isn't peace, it's pressure containment. And pressure doesn't disappear, it waits. The body's role in mental decline. The mind doesn't suffer alone. The body participates. Reduced movement leads 2. Muscle stiffness, fatigue, poor sleep, lower energy. Physical discomfort feeds mental distress. Sleep patterns break down. Day and night blur. And when sleep is unreliable, emotional regulation weakens. Everything feels heavier. The vanishing of purpose before lockdown. Prison life, however restrictive, had structure, work details, education programs, movement schedules. Lockdowns erase much of that overnight. Without purpose, days lose direction. People stop planning, stop setting goals, stop imagining future milestones. The brain shifts into survival mode, not active survival, passive endurance. Endurance is not strength from the outside. Enduring confinement looks like resilience inside. It feels different. Endurance often comes with emotional numbing. People stop reacting, stop hoping, stop expecting change. This emotional flattening is protective at first, but over time, it dulls motivation and identity. You don't just lose freedom, you lose emotional range. Why lockdown feels worse than expected? Many people assume prison is already restrictive or so. What's the difference? The difference is movement. Even limited movement gives the brain feedback, progress, choice. Variation. Remove that, and the brain receives a different message. Nothing you do matters. And that message, repeated daily, reshapes behavior. The rise of internalized control after months of lockdown. Something unsettling happens. People stop testing boundaries. They don't ask when doors will open. They don't plan activities. They don't anticipate change. They internalize restriction. The rules no longer need enforcement. They are obeyed automatically. This is one of the most powerful effects of prolonged confinement. Control moves from the system into the mind. Mental health in a system not built for stillness. Mental health services inside prisons were already limited. Lockdowns stretched them thinner. Appointments delayed. Movement restricted. Observation reduced. But the most dangerous aspect wasn't lack of care. It was invisibility. People suffering quietly are easy to miss. And silence hides distress well. When adaptation becomes a warning sign eventually. Many people report the same shift. They feel calmer. Not because things improved, but because they stopped resisting. This calm is often mistaken for adjustment. In reality, it's withdrawal. A narrowing of emotional engagement. And once the mind adapts to confinement, re-expanding it becomes difficult. The unseen consequence here is what makes 22-hour lockdown uniquely dangerous. It doesn't shock the system. It erodes it, slowly, predictably, quietly. There are no dramatic moments to point to, just gradual change, and gradual change is easy to dismiss. The question no one wants to answer. If we know prolonged confinement reshapes psychology, why does it continue? Because it works. It reduces movement, reduces incidents, reduces visible disorder. But what it creates instead is invisible damage, damage that doesn't appear in daily reports. Damage that follows people beyond the walls, by the time doors finally begin to open again. Something unexpected has already happened. Many people are no longer the same, because once the mind learns stillness, freedom doesn't feel automatic. When the doors finally begin to open again, most people expect relief. That's the assumption from the outside that freedom of movement automatically restores what confinement took away. But inside modern prisons, something very different happens. The doors open, and many people hesitate, not because they're afraid of punishment, but because their minds have learned a new normal. For months, sometimes years, movement meant disruption, noise meant tension, choice meant risk. Stillness became safety. And when stillness becomes safety, freedom feels unfamiliar. At first, it shows up in small ways. People step out slowly. They pause in corridors. They hesitate before speaking. The space feels larger than they remember. The noise feels sharper. The pace feels wrong. Because when you've lived most of your life in a few square meters, open space doesn't feel liberating. It feels exposed. The body reacts before the mind understands why. Heart rates increase. Breathing changes. Muscles tighten. This isn't weakness. It's adaptation. The nervous system learned to survive silence and restriction. Now it has to relearn movement. And that takes time. Time that isn't always available. As lockdowns ease, prisons begin restarting routines. Work details resume. Programs reopen. Movement increases. But the damage doesn't disappear just because schedules return. Some people struggle to focus. Others feel overwhelmed by activity they once craved. After living with nothing to plan for, planning feels exhausting. After months without decision-making, choice feels heavy. The brain has been trained to expect nothing, and expectations are hard to rebuild. Even conversation changes. During lockdown, silence became default. Words were used carefully, sparingly. Now, social interaction feels loud. People interrupt each other. Misunderstandings happen faster. Frustration surfaces unexpectedly. Because social muscles, like physical ones, weaken without use, and rebuilding them isn't instant. What's most unsettling is how invisible this struggle is. From the outside, things look improved. Doors open more often, movement increases, schedules return, but inside, many people feel disconnected, as if they're participating in life from a distance, present, but not fully engaged. This is where time distortion follows them. Even after lockdown ends, days still feel strange. Some feel rushed, as if they're constantly behind. Others feel empty, as if time has no weight. Long-term planning feels abstract. The future feels unreal, because when time loses structure for long enough, the brain stops trusting it, and rebuilding trust takes longer than reopening doors. For some, the hardest moment comes not inside prison, but after release. On the outside, freedom is loud.